So in Texas, they're debating a voter suppression bill that largely targets African Americans, to which I say, of course. So now here comes the funny part, kind of. Texas House Speaker Dade Phelan had an admonition for the rest of the legislature. He said, now there's one thing you cannot mention as we're suppressing African American votes. Let's watch.
Members, this is a reminder to everyone to be civil and respectful of our colleagues as we debate SB 1. The chair would appreciate members not using the word racism this afternoon.
So, as we're being racist, we would appreciate you not pointing it out. Duly noted. I think the bigger problem might be that you're doing the racism rather than the people talking about it. And then a Democrat got up and basically with a very simple question pointed out the absurdity of it. Let's watch.
Intentional discrimination against people of a certain race, is that racism?
That is,
Ms. Hinojosa.
Those words, intentional discrimination, I think can be fairly characterized in that manner.
We can talk about racial impacts of this legislation without accusing members of this body of being racist.
Respectfully, I'm not accusing members of this body. I'm talking about
members' outbursts are inappropriate.
You know what? Taking away your votes and your ability to vote, appropriate. You pointing out that we're doing it, inappropriate. By the way, from the party whose main theme is free speech. Things that make you go,
This is where the problem is always like. They're always talking about, hey, we don't want to, you guys are always bringing up racism. So now they need to make sure they implement a way to make sure people don't even talk about it. Don't even mention that it exists. Because again, every time there's a history lesson about what we've done in this country and the reasons why we've done it, the one thing that's important is to make sure we don't bring up what we've done, because people just might get a hint of what we've always done and what we may call that. We need to sugarcoat, whitewash it, whatever we can to make sure people don't know who we are, who we were, who we still will continue to become until we do something about it. You have to protect the way things have always been, and if we just don't talk about it, I mean, think about the critical race theory that is still not being taught at the levels that they're saying it's being taught. They're gonna make Americans hate the country. Why would they hate the country? If they actually address what has been happening and ways to fix it, they might actually love the country. And in fact, the people that have been affected by the things that you do might have more of an affinity for the country. If you had an affinity for them. Instead, this is just, you need to censor people. Man, again, that was such a good point about, hey, freedom of speech, don't tread on me. This is what we got away from England for trying to tell us what we can and can't do. But now we're right back into it. Because we don't want to say what we've really done. Man, we're afraid of ourselves. We're afraid of our own history because people just might hold us accountable for what we've done. Accountability, that's another part. Accountability is only for the people that we've always stepped on. Get up. How about some accountability as I put my foot on your neck? Don't even say what I'm doing. I'm not putting my foot on your neck. Don't say that to me. That's gonna hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
It's tiring. It's tiring to keep going through all this over and over and over again. You hear the gasps from the audience? She said racism.
So look, one quick point, and then we kick it over to Ben, and then I want to make a couple more points because I'm me. Okay, so if they were debating whether to plant more flowers in the local park, would he have to warn people, now guys, we're debating flowers, but I don't want anybody talking about racism. You got to warn people, but don't talk about racism if you're passing a racist bill. Okay, Ben.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and like I think let's put it in a metaphor, because obviously, imagine a criminal defense attorney showing up in court and saying, Your Honor, out of respect to everybody that's here today, I would really appreciate us not using the word larceny. I think that's really offensive, and I just don't feel like hearing it. So if we could just not use the word larceny at all, that'd be very appreciated. It's got that vibe where it's like they're getting caught being racist, and they're scrambling to be like, we just have to censor the word racism, and they can't call it out.
Yeah, and so Now let me give you a real example and something that was a little bit off the beaten path. So the real thing is Jim Crow laws. So that happened in this country, and there was a big range. It was went from lynchings to taking away voting rights, which is the same thing we're fighting about here. And if you're thinking like lynching, come on, was that really an issue? Like, yeah, people did it, but it wasn't like people were in favor of it being legal. No, you'd be wrong. The filibuster was most often used historically to stop anti-lynching laws. They did not have anti-lynching laws, and so the Congress was trying to pass it, and conservatives blocked it using the filibuster. So that was the conversation, but I don't know if they were allowed to talk about racism or not in the lynching laws. But in the voting rights laws, they were trying to find different ways in the South to block African Americans from voting. Why? Racism. And that's where we're right back at it in Texas. But Dade Phelan caught feelings. And he was like, we get to do anything we want to you. You don't even get to complain about it. You don't even get to address it.
No, but imagine going into a debate though. There's a debate about a topic and you can't talk about that topic, or at least your side of the point. Like, you don't believe racism exists. It's fine if you don't think racism exists in this law and in this approach to voting rights. Say you don't believe that. You get to make your point as to why it doesn't exist. Does the other side get to make a point as to why it does exist or why this is a racist law? So are we even gonna have a debate, or is this just a theater? Is this just a show? And then we go, hey, you guys, by the way, I know what you're gonna say because we've always rejected what you've said, so just don't say it. I'm trying to figure out where in the rules this is allowed even. Like, you can bang a gavel and say, let's not use this word. Why? What is it about that word? That's the first question that should have been asked. Okay, I won't say the word racism. So if you're there and you're like, so can you guys explain why you don't want this word to be used? And let them go ahead and spin themselves, and they'll expose us reasons why they don't want that word used.
Yeah, so now the second point is in Turkey, they teach you, or at least they taught me, I remember I stayed there until middle of third grade, right? I was born there, and birth certificate being doctored as we speak. And they taught us that Turkey never lost a war except World War I. World War I was a little hard to deny, okay? And as a kid, second grade, third grade, whenever they told us that garbage, right? I believed it, because what did I know? That was the authoritative teacher telling me that, right? And so, like many years, embarrassing number of years later, in the middle of college or law school or something, I was like, oh yeah, wait, Turks lost that war and that war. Oh, of course that was propaganda. Of course it was, right? Mm-hmm. And any thinking person eventually realizes it's propaganda, right? So it doesn't help you to teach a wrong version of history. It just makes you look ridiculous.
Who's the you? It doesn't help you. Which you?
Yeah, well, actually, I kind of want to say it does help some people, and the reason why. Sundown towns reached their peak in the 80s. So if you're 60 years old today, you were maybe participating in sundown towns when you were in 20s. You might have been in one of those mobs, right? And so there might be people who are very much alive today participating in those sundown towns, literally doing like lynch mobs and just harassing like black and brown folks that happen to be in town after sundown, who don't want people to talk about the history because they were personally involved in it. And like, that's one of those things that I think people don't realize how recent that history really is.
So you guys are of course right, and in fact, if Emmett Till wasn't murdered, he could still be alive today. I think he'd be in his 80s, if I remember right, or maybe even 70s. And so we did a story about that a little while back. So that's how recent these lynchings were. Some of the folks, if they weren't lynched, could still be alive today. So it's not ancient history at all. And of course, you guys are right. A lot of people don't want to talk about it, and that's why they ban you from even talking about it in whether it's state legislature or oftentimes, as Jayar pointed out, in schools, right? Make sure you teach false history, not correct history. But what it doesn't help is the country. Because if you don't know what the problems are, you can't fix them. So if you go around going, oh, we're the best, man. I told you the other absurd thing. I mean, there's many absurd things about every country, including Turkey. And I give you those examples so you can step outside of this perspective for a second and see how absurd it is from a different perspective, right? I also remember going to Turkish American pride events and us chanting, Turkey is the biggest, there's no other country that's even big. And like I remember in the middle of the chant going, no, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Okay. So, like for example, we all moved because we're Turkish Americans to a larger country. Okay. So, anyways, teach history and let people speak and let them have real debates. And then in Texas, you're gonna outvote them anyway, and you're gonna get to do voter suppression. And by the way, at the federal level, get rid of the racist filibuster so that the states cannot individually take away voting rights, and we go back to a thing called democracy. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, Jayar, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.